Shoot, that is very nerve-wracking. Okay. Just don't let anyone else other than the panelists in, Anandita. I'm just letting Alex in, Ananya, yeah?
Okay.
All right. Hi. So sorry about that. We were running a few minutes late for the other session, as is the case with every large gathering in this side of the world. Really apologize. But hi, Pamela. Hi, Alex. If we can maybe do quick video and audio checks.
Yes, I think Pamela's reconnecting, but can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you loud and clear. Pamela,
Perfect.
Yes. I think she's connecting to audio. Alex, if it's not too much trouble, I'd sent across a Zoom background PNG file to you. If you could try and have that up at the background, similar to the one that I have right now.
Definitely.
Hi, guys. Give me just 1 second.
Sure. Thanks, Suchi, for those messages to the waiting room. We'll let them in
No problem.
A couple of minutes.
Hi, Alex. Hi, Pamela. We're
Hello.
tight on time. As you can see, please watch for our reminder messages while Cypria is trying to get you to get the screen up and test audio. Yes, wonderful. We see each other. We will be off camera unless absolutely necessary. Cypria, don't worry about my background. I'll make sure I put my local one, but just want to make sure you get the others.
Sounds good. Thank you all. Cypria, quick question. Do you have an introductory slide with the agenda for the session?
Yes, so there's a very introductory slide. I don't have the agenda up, but there's this very short 1-minute video that we have that introduces the South Asia convening, which I will play, and then just do a very brief intro to you, Pamela, and hand it over to you. And then we can take it from there.
Fantastic.
So Pamela, it's not a super, like I said, the split up was for us, but feel free to just tell them, what the general flow is, which is why we didn't put the agenda up. We also don't want to make it super formal, and my take is the agenda tends to do that. So just share that with them in the voice rather than have a slide up.
The Anti-South Asia convening. Without further ado, I am going to hand over the session to Pamela, who's joining us. Pamela heads the SME Climate Hub, and she will be walking us through the great work that the SME Climate Hub is doing. So I will not spend too much time on that. And given that we're already running a couple of minutes late, we are going to jump right in. Thanks again, everyone who's joined. Just a request to stay on mute if you're not speaking, to avoid background noise. Pamela, over to you.
Thanks so much for this introduction, Cypria, and thank you so much also for your invitation to facilitate this workshop. So I'm Pamela Jouven, I'm the director of the SME Climate Hub. We'll tell you more about this initiative in just a minute. And I'm also here with Alex Schmidt from Normative, who's one of our co-founding partners. You'll hear more about how we work together in just a few minutes. But first, before we jump into a presentation that we've pulled together for you, we had a bit of a question for the group. And Cypria, I believe that you've prepared a bit of a poll for our audience today. We were curious to hear from you on whether you've heard about the hub already and or whether you're already using tools for SME climate action. So maybe we can pull up those questions for you on screen. It will help us understand who we're speaking with today. So thanks in advance for answering these two questions. And let's give it a few seconds maybe.
Just checking, Pamela, if you can see the responses coming in at your end.
So I cannot. I can see the questions, so
Okay, I'll just share it in. We've had, I think 70% of them have responded. Just wait a couple more minutes for the others to respond, and I'll share the results.
Fantastic. That's great to see. Okay, so a number of you, 41% in total, have already heard about the hub, which is great. You will see that we're trying to expand our presence in South Asia as well. I'll tell you more about our plans there. And also great to hear that many of you, same percentage, as a matter of fact, 41% are already using tools to measure their emissions and climate impact. Okay, that's fantastic. So let's try and make the most of the time that we have today. Obviously, you're more than welcome to ask any questions in the chat box as we go through the presentation. Just to give you an idea, I'll start by walking you through a few slides to present the hub as an initiative, and then Alex will jump in to give you a demo of one of our key tools, the Business Carbon Calculator, and then I'll take some more time to really just walk you through the website and show you what a second tool looks like, Climate Fit, a climate education course that we've developed with our partners. So this is what you can look forward to. But let's start with a bit of a presentation. So sharing my screen. You should all be able to see it, and I'm going into presentation mode. So as you can see on this slide, the hub is an initiative, a global initiative, and it's actually also a joint effort of different organizations. So it's hosted by the Women Business Coalition, but it was developed in partnership with other co-founding partners, including Normative, who's represented on this call with Alex, but also the UN Race to Zero, the Exponential Roadmap Initiative, and we have a large ecosystem of global partners that we work with, as you'll see on one of the slides. But what is the SME Climate Hub really? So the hub was built as a one-stop shop, so a single platform where SMEs can find all that they need in order to start taking action towards net zero. And we provide three different things. So SMEs can make a commitment on the website that is aligned with the 1.5 degree goal of the Paris Agreement. This is also what gives them access to the Race to Zero, so this global campaign ran by the United Nations. It's the biggest campaign ever launched on climate action that brings together 120 governments and thousands of non-state actors. So that's the first thing. But we also provide a number of free tools and resources to help SMEs get there. And we'll show you what some of these look like in just a minute. And finally, we're also working on incentives for SMEs to really encourage them to take action, which we know is not always easy for an SME. We currently have over 4,600 SMEs who've made the commitment, obviously many more also using our tools that are available also for small businesses who haven't made the commitment yet, to help them understand what this is all about. And our SMEs come from 106 different countries at the moment, but our community is really growing. So why did we create the hub? You probably know about this already if you've decided to join this session, but of course SMEs play a key role both as part of communities and as part of supply chains. They make up 90% of businesses worldwide and they employ 2 billion people. So they're really a key actor. They represent a key category when it comes to climate action. We also know that they're very vulnerable when it comes to climate change. About half of them never reopen a disaster. And we've also run our own research to really understand the barriers that SMEs face when it comes to taking climate action. And what we've seen is that they tend to face very specific challenges that have to do with the lack of resources. That means capacity, time, money, but also the lack of skills and knowledge. As you will see in the graph on the right, many of the SMEs in our own community still feel that they don't have the right skills when they join the hub in order to really start taking action. So we've built the hub to try and address all of these challenges really, and you'll see that we're doing this in different ways. And for businesses, what's in it for them? Well, taking action makes business sense. We keep repeating this. It's a way for businesses, including small and medium-sized enterprises, to really navigate the shifting expectations of all the different stakeholders they're having to deal with, from consumers to big buyers, governments who are changing regulations. So it's a way to gain a competitive advantage, to reduce costs by improving efficiency, but also managing risks for the business and really growing the brand and getting easier access to finance in many cases. So there's a lot obviously to be gained in taking action through the hub. Now, let's have a look at what the platform looks like really, and you'll see what the website looks like in just a few seconds. We've designed our user experience to make it as simple as possible for SMEs to understand what this is all about. So with the tools that we offer at the beginning of the user journey, so to speak, we help SMEs understand where they stand, really. So what their emissions are and what it means for a small business to take action. So this is the beginning of the process. Once SMEs are more familiar with this area and understand what's in it for them, we encourage them to make the SME Climate Commitment, which gives them access to the UN Race to Zero, with all that it means in terms of recognition, visibility, and communication benefits. And finally, once they make the commitment, this unlocks additional resources and incentives for them to use. That includes a reporting tool, but also action models that we're currently working on, as well as incentives such as a badge to use online to really communicate about their commitment and progress to, again, buyers and consumers. The SME Climate Commitment is very simple. As I said, it's in line with science, the 1.5 degree goal of the Paris Agreement. We've tried to keep this as streamlined as possible for small businesses. So the idea is for them to commit to halving their greenhouse gas emissions before 2030 and achieving net zero by 2050, while also reporting on their progress on an annual basis from 18 months after they make the commitment, so that they really have the time to educate themselves, take it all in, start using the tools and building a plan. These are some of the key tools that are available on the platform. I've already mentioned the Climate Fit education course. Obviously, you'll hear much more about our business carbon calculator with Alex's presentation. I also wanted to flag that we have a library of external tools that is created by Oxford University. So these are additional tools and resources developed by other organizations out there that are available for SMEs who have the time to dig a little deeper. What I will say is that the tools that we developed ourselves for the platform, from Climate Fit to the calculator, are really specifically designed for small businesses. And we're also creating this as an integrated suite of tools. So for example, with the reporting tool that we'll be launching in just a few weeks in September, we'll make sure to build bridges between the calculator and the reporting tool, but also additional models that we'll be adding further down the line, so that information can be shared between these different tools and SMEs can use them in the most efficient way. We also have a financial support guide that we created with other partners, so BSR and the University of Cambridge, their Sustainability Leadership Institute. Similar to Climate Fit, this is a resource that really helps SMEs better understand what climate action means for them and where they can get funding to take action, because we know that sometimes this is a barrier. So it explains what the ecosystem looks like and where the funding can come from. So from buyers, banks, local government, or even investors, and how to best approach these different stakeholder categories. So we provide many practical resources, case studies, even email templates that businesses can use in order to reach out to these different stakeholders, as well as success stories, so that they understand how they could make the most of these relationships. And often when we present the hub to small businesses, we get the question, so what can I do? What should my climate action plan looks like? Well, the truth is, it will vary from one business to the other, from one sector to the other, and even from one country to the other. So it really depends on the context that you're operating in. But there are a few low-hanging fruits really that apply to any business. And so it often makes a lot of sense to start by transitioning to renewable energy, or increasing efficiency across the business, switching to circular systems, which in many cases might mean minimizing waste, for example, and also looking at the vehicles that you might be using as part of your business, whether they're electric or not, and talking to some of your key suppliers also to see if you can join forces and work towards reducing emissions together. And this is one of the reasons why, in addition to the tools that I've already walked you through, we'll be adding action models to the SME Climate Hub. So these will be models that will help SMEs understand which actions to prioritize based on their emissions profile that will have been identified, for example, through the carbon calculator. We're currently working on the first set of action models that should go live over COP27, so the UN conference that is going to take place in November. And this will be really a key milestone for us. Now, just a couple more words from me before I pass on the mic to Alex. As I said at the beginning, we currently have over 4,600 SMEs from many different countries, 106 to be precise, but 2021 was our startup year, really. So now we're looking to proactively expand our presence globally. And this for us means working with different categories of partners to make sure that we can reach out to the right people and the right SMEs at moments that matter. So we're currently working with 4 different categories of partners that go from obviously strategic partners who are helping us build the platform, but also corporate partners who are interested in leveraging the hub as an SME supplier engagement mechanism. And we're running pilots with some of them to see how they can really use the hub to work with their supply chains. We also have outreach partners, so big networks, business associations, global ones that really help us spread the word so that we can reach out to as many SMEs as possible. And interestingly, we're now also starting to take more of a local approach. So working with national partners to adapt some of our contents to the local context, and also make sure that we can reach out to SMEs through local organizations and actors that they're already familiar with. So it all started with the campaign that we ran with the UK government last year in the lead up to COP26. So the previous UN conference on climate that took place a little less than a year ago. The campaign that we ran with them was very successful. So since then, we've been working on replicating this in other geographies. We have a Spanish version of the website that we're now using in Spain, with support from the Spanish government, and soon in Latin America. We're working with America Isolin, a big coalition in the US. But the point that I'm getting at here is that we'll also soon be launching a chapter, so to speak, of the hub in India. And so we're working proactively with many actors on the ground, Andy, of course, being one of them, to make sure that we can add content to the hub that will resonate with the local audience, and that we can really work on supporting Indian SMEs. And hopefully this is going to be a first step in engaging SMEs in the region more broadly. I'll just stop on this slide. This is the end of the presentation, but I just wanted to pull up 2 quotes from two of our SMEs that you can read in your own time, that really show how SMEs are really committed to working with us and towards reducing emissions for a better planet. If you have any questions, this would be a good time to come in before we move on to the rest of the session with the demo of the calculator and of the Comet Fit education course. So I'll pause and see if anyone wants to either jump in or write a question in the chat.
I don't see any questions at the moment, Pamela. I think it would be helpful to sort of go through the walkthrough, and then we can have questions come in. And just a reminder to the others, please do send in questions via the chat that the hosts and the panelists have access to your questions there, so we can address the relevant ones.
Fantastic, I'll do that. So I'll stop sharing my screen. And
Sorry,
Alex,
and as I just said that, I had two questions come in, so I am just going to go ahead and share, I think, a little more logistical, Pamela, so maybe good to address this before Alex gets started. I think a broader question of if there's any criteria for SMEs to join the Climate Hub, if you could maybe speak to that. And the other question we have is regarding presence or operations in Africa at the moment.
yes, two excellent ones. So in terms of the definition that we use for SMEs, we've decided to pick a very broad one because, again, we're a global initiative with a global presence. And so we need this definition to work in the different regions that we're operating in. So right now for us is an SME is any business with fewer than 500 employees. So quite broad, as you can see, and applicable to many different types of businesses. And with regards to the second question on Africa, we already have a number of SMEs who are part of our community who are based in Africa. And of course, this is one of the regions where we'll be focusing our efforts in the coming months and years. We've had to, pick our battles a little bit. We couldn't do everything at the same time, but we'll be running specific activities targeted at that region very soon.
Yeah, I think we can continue, Pamela. I'll let you know if there are more questions that come in.
Sounds good. So Alex, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you. I hope you can hear me all well. Thanks also from my side for the invitation. Really happy and excited to spread the word around our tools and toolboxes a bit further. And to begin with, let me just start by Pamela already outlined so nicely the journey that we take SMEs on the Climate Hub. And I'm here to represent particularly the business carbon calculator. But let me just give you some context by quickly jumping into, and I hope this shows well, the homepage where you actually see the journey mapped out. So let me know if you cannot see it, otherwise I just assume it's there. So when you are on the Climate Hub page, you will see a journey that is mapped out and starts with the first step, measure or calculate your footprint. That's the one step I wanted to zoom in on further. But we also have, and Pamela already kind of foreshadowed this, for example, a learning module here that I think Pamela will also walk you through in further detail in a few minutes. And then, of course, further resources and support. And ultimately, hopefully after those, you are ready to commit to the SME Climate Hub. So that's just a bit for context. But if you go to the calculation step as the first step, this is to give you an idea of where you actually stand with your emissions, because we appreciate that it might be difficult or maybe even a bit daunting to commit to reducing your emissions if you do not even know yet where you stand at the moment. So that's why we have, together with Google and of course the Climate Hub team, developed the business carbon calculator. And you can definitely try this out yourself. It's for free. It's accessible via our Sme Climate Hub homepage. So why don't I just quickly show you a bit how this calculator looks like. And before I go into the demo, meaning playing a bit around with the interface and numbers, I would like to provide you some more background for the tool itself, because Pamela already said very well the stage for the tool and the toolboxes we have. So SMEs are small, of course, by definition, but they are in sum total very, very, very important for our net zero transition. So if we do not manage to get SMEs on board, or if SMEs cannot start even on the journey to net zero emissions, it will be very difficult for us all, and also for bigger businesses, to reach net zero. So this is just recognizing or appreciating the importance of all of you, or I guess most of you who are here today, coming from smaller businesses. And the top reasons, again, Pamela mentioned we did some research with the Climate Hub team about reasons why SMEs currently do not take action. And most of the time it's apparently because a lack of skills and or funds. And I would kind of draw the line a bit further and say, if it's a lack of skills and funds, it's probably also that the tools are missing to provide them with the right skills to actually get started on the journey. So that's the reason why we focused on a calculator that is actually for free and giving everyone a good first baseline. Or just to highlight our main focus areas when we did this together with Google and the Sme Climate Hub team was definitely to make it really accessible for SMEs, meaning lowering all the entry barriers. So using all our knowledge and research of small businesses to actually put together a tool that is optimized for their specific needs. A second aspect was the visual representation of the results to make it really actionable for you to gain insights into where do you actually stand right now with your emissions profile. And very importantly, also transparency in the so-called scope 3 emissions, meaning your own value chain up and downstream, which oftentimes gets carved out and not mentioned by other tools. And last but not least, since this should be scalable, we want to have we did develop a self-serve tool to help you with the next steps on the Climate Hub as well, so that you can use those results to actually produce your reports and ideally start your reductions the next day. So that's a bit of the background of the tool. And why don't I then once more share another screen where I show you what the tool itself looks like when you're entering it. So when you go through this journey page I mentioned before, you will ultimately be asked to create an account. Again, everything for free on Normative. Maybe I should have mentioned that before as well. So Normative, we are a carbon calculation engine. So meaning we did not just start with the calculation project for this free tool. Quite the opposite. Since 2014, we're in the business of helping companies to measure and then reduce their emissions. And what you see here now, the tool is kind of a stripped down version of our main product. And stripped down because otherwise it might have been or would have been too much for small companies to take on, since obviously with big enterprises, you have a lot of workload required and of course also resources that would go into a full-fledged carbon accounting solution. So this is a version that is optimized for smaller businesses. I just walked through the main steps here. So you create an account. Let's just say you choose your name. I'm just gonna walk through some of the main steps here. You can enter your tax registration number, but you do not have to. So if you enter one, we are a bit in a better position to actually see where you come from and where you're registered. But if you do not have that, that's also perfectly fine. And then you can select your country of origin. Let me just, for this presentation, locate this company in India. And then you tell us which industry you're coming in. So I'm just choosing now here, beverage manufacturing. Then your journey starts. And it's again, super simple, a few clicks, and you do have to gather some data. That is definitely necessary. But we always give you a lot of support in where you can find the data to make it really easy and kind of tangible for you to get started here. So as a first step, you're going to select your reporting period. It can be your financial year, it can be the last calendar year. And of course, you can repeat this. So once you've measured once, you can also enter maybe data from another year to compare your progress, ideally. We're going to ask you what your company size is. Again, the tool is optimized for a company size or an SME size of between, let's say, 0 and 50 to 80 employees. Our experience is just if you have more employees, your operations are getting more complex, which does not mean you cannot use the tool. So we have companies here with several hundred employees that still count as SMEs, and they use the tool successfully and gain relevant insights still. So just for information, it is optimized for smaller companies, but does work for everyone. Lastly, we're going to ask you for your revenues. I'm just going to honestly just going to enter some arbitrarily chosen numbers here, just to again show you how the tool roughly operates. This is very important for us, that the revenue and also your expenses, to be able to map it down to a calculation that is based on greenhouse gas protocol. Now we start on the category fuel and energy, which will be translated to your own kind of scope 1 and scope 2 emissions ultimately. So we're going to ask you, for example, around company cars that you have had, and then we try to get as accurate information as possible. However, if you do not have that information, that's no problem. You can always say, I don't know, or, you know, I've just spent a certain amount on fuel and gas, and then we're going to calculate based on the amount that you entered, what actually you have probably reduced in terms of emissions. And again, I'm just going to enter some arbitrarily chosen numbers here, which might not be the best representative footprint here in the end, but just to give you an idea of how this tool is working. So kilowatt hours consumed, and then we are almost done with the first category, and now we move a bit to, you know, heating, steam, and we're done with the first step. The next step is really, really important because this goes into your value chain. So we're going to ask you around your total expenses in a given year to help us to map your expenses to a carbon footprint. So again, I'm just going to choose some arbitrarily pick numbers. So I'm just going to say this was my expense volume, and then you're going to help us to attribute the expenses to typically most relevant scope 3, so indirect emission categories of the greenhouse gas protocol. For example, you have spent a certain amount on train tickets, you have spent a certain amount on flight tickets. You might have also, let me just close this category, had some transport going on, so you might have had certain expenses through road. You might have had others on air, and then let's just say you also had some rail, and then you probably have purchased products, and you're gonna enter those. And I'm just going to close this now. Let me just see. There's another category. You can, of course, also enter services, capital goods. Let's say you had legal expenses as well. I'm just going to put in some numbers here. With this, you're done. You can now calculate your emissions. Actually, the engine does it for you, and you get to this main dashboard. Again, just to re-emphasize this, I just put in any numbers without thinking because I was also talking on the side, and I usually can't do two things at the same time very well. So do not take these numbers here for representative for a beverage manufacturer in India. This is probably a bit off due to my choosing some pretty much random numbers. But what you can see on the dashboard then are your scope 1 emissions, if those were your actual expenses and numbers of, for example, fuel consumed, your scope 2, and then you see all of your scope 3 expenses. And this is really important that you see the breakdown according to categories. So, for example, your biggest, for this company, the biggest contributing factor to emissions has apparently been the upstream transportation distribution, whereas business travel, for example, was only accounting for a fraction of those. And again, the typical picture emerges: scope 1 and scope 2 only account, so your direct emissions only account for a fraction of your overall emissions. So this is very helpful for companies to wrap their heads around. The dashboard has a lot more to offer. You can see many, many tooltips around what is actually metric ton of CO2 equivalents, what actually scopes, the scopes that I've been just sketching out quickly. You can zoom in on this. And there's also an underlying methodology, a help site where you can actually go in and kind of look into what has been the calculation underlying this footprint. So meaning greenhouse gas protocol 101 pretty much. Last but not least, you can go back to the Climate Hub and continue your journey, the journey I mapped out at the beginning. And you could also benchmark your own emissions. So let's say, kind of my example was 11.5. Let's just go to the industry insights. And I hope I'm still sharing this, the second tab. So you should be brought to another tab now. Yes. And perfect. Thank you very much. And this is the comparison, a company in India of the beverage manufacturing with a representative revenue stream of 10 million euros. We had to choose like one currency to convert this. So this is just for the sake of comparison now euros, and you see roughly their profile. So apparently the numbers I entered were not really representative. Average company has more, so in the beverage industry in India, has way more electricity consumption, while scope 3 appears to be a bit lower than in my case. But again, it's just like for comparisons. If you have your own numbers, this should give you indication as to, am I, like where in my industry do I roughly fall? So going back here, you have the overview, and you can, of course, add more time periods and go back and actually reconfigure those if you want to edit data. So there's a lot of options here to play around with. And I can just encourage you to actually do this and try to play around a bit and yeah, map out your own footprint to get started on the net zero journey. And with this, I would be open to answer any questions. And otherwise, yeah, happy to have any feedback or comments from you also afterwards.
Sure. Alex, I have a few questions that have come in through chat directly to me that I can help read out. I think the first question was from Smriti, who's requesting information about how do you get your benchmark figures? Have you already got them for every sector in every country? What does that look like?
Yeah, exactly. So I'll just reshare quickly because then you can actually see where data comes from. That's super important for us. So thanks for the question. I cannot highlight this enough. This is nothing, we don't want to be secretive about these things. It's really important that you know where data come from. So for the industry insights, we use a database called Exobase. This is a global database of emission factors. It's actually based on an environmentally extended input-output model. And you can click on this and then you are brought to the Exobase pages where you have more information around this. So this is where it's coming from. And yes, we cover pretty much the entire globe. Definitely, there are differences in coverage due to data availability, but we always make sure to connect to the latest, you can say, peer-reviewed databases that are available for emission factors.
Got it. Thanks. Smith, I hope that answers your question. I think the next question, Alex, is not directly about the tool, but more about Normative's work, is if the organization also assists in carbon offsets for SMEs or any work that you do on that front.
Yes. So carbon removals or offsets are part of the net zero journey. That is true. So we do not encourage companies to measure and then offset. That might you run the risk of running into some gray area of edging on greenwashing eventually, even because if you just take the shortcut, it might look good on paper because it can claim to be quote unquote carbon neutral or even climate positive. There are all these fancy terms out there, but they don't mean much. What we really focus on at the Climate Hub and Normative is the net zero narrative, meaning you first measure, then you reduce as much as possible, and the residual amount can be compensated, but ideally with well-vetted projects that are high or that rank high on prominence, additionality, and there are many other criteria. So we at Normative, yes, we work with our clients to help them to also compensate for the residual footprint. And the Climate Hub has, of course, also connections then a whole network. And again, we're going to launch soon action modules and more blocks that help you to actually see what would be next steps, and compensation of your residual emissions will be part of the toolbox, though it will not be the focus.
Great, thanks. In the interest of time, I think we can do one more question before I pass it on to Pamela again. This question is more about what do the industry-wise sort of criterion look like when you're doing those benchmarking, right? Is there any information on that front? I think specifically about how can you help localize the net zero carbon targets for these SMEs in terms of the more contextualized next steps rather than just sort of broad next steps that the carbon calculator tool can help provide?
Yeah. I think there will always be a bit of a trade-off. So we can not advise an individual company on the Sme Climate Hub on the exact next steps that would be the best for your specific situation. It's of course, we have to first take a self-served approach where you can go in and you have the general recommendations, of course, based on your profile. So based on what you have measured, based on where you stand, there will be recommendations for your next steps. Of course, if you are on the full tool like Normative, our main product, you're going to have an advisor at your hand that does do all the nitty-gritty next steps with you together. I mean, that's of course part of the service package. On the Climate Hub, we will have to find a good middle ground, so to speak, where we're going to have actionable next steps, though the degree to which they are fully customized to your exact situation has to be a bit narrower or a bit that sounds a bit broader than if you had your dedicated consultant or advisor at your hand. So yes, tailored, but probably you will not get the most granular insights that are possible. Pamela, maybe you also have something.
Yeah,
activate.
I was about to jump in. So thank you for this question. Obviously, as you will have understood, the hub was built to be as scalable as possible and help as many SMEs as possible. So this is why we've designed the tools the way you've just seen. That said, as I mentioned before, we're now taking a bit of a local approach. So looking at specific regions and countries where we want to proactively expand our presence and joining forces with local actors. So one of the things that we will do through these local consortia is to add country-specific content to the hub. We'll have, for example, a specific landing page for India where we'll be adding content that we think will resonate with the SME community, that we might be able to refer back to other tools that have been created by our partners or other stakeholders on the ground. So we'll try and complement, obviously, our global offering with the specific information. And as we grow the hub and expand our activities in the coming years, we might be able to get a bit more granular as well in our tools. But that's in the pipeline, of course. We cannot do it all at the same time.
Great. I think there's just one more question in line with the tool. Alex, how do you verify that the information inputted once SMEs commit to net zero is actually reliable? What does that look like on your end?
Yeah, also something definitely Pamela can speak to as well from our side, just from the tool side. We do not, issue a, let's say, an auditing, or we do not do auditing of your data, obviously. So it is to a certain degree the business's own responsibility. They're gonna check a box, say all the data I put in here, I hereby verify these are my company data and to the best of my ability and knowledge. This is all we have to offer, so to speak. We will implement on the hub, and that's something Pamela can speak more to, more and more accountability mechanisms to make sure that actually companies do not use tools like the calculator to actually, just enter like I did now, like a 111, and they all look good, and then they're done. No, there will be an accountability mechanism. Right now, it is really by just having, a checkbox and statement. I hereby declare that. So it's more the business responsibility, while we make sure that the calculations underlying the footprint measurement, that this calculation is always up to date and kind of verified and aligned with Greenhouse Gas Protocol and other standards.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. And yeah, I'm not on mute. I'm okay. So just to add to this, so our main accountability mechanism is going to be implemented through the reporting tool that we've been working on. We're currently testing the beta version of the tool, and we'll be launching the final version in September. So as I mentioned before, this reporting tool is also going to be connected to the calculator. So we'll pre-populate some of the forms in the reporting tool through the calculator, and the reporting data will be accessible on the hub, not in an aggregated form, because we don't want for-profit companies to take advantage of this, but on individual SMEs profiles, the reports or parts of these reports will be accessible. So it's a way to encourage companies, of course, to be as transparent as possible. We'll also be doing some big data analysis to monitor trends, and we'll also try and do spot checks just to make sure that our SMEs are using this reporting tool the way we want them to. And it's both in our interest and in SMEs' interest, because we know that these reports are going to be great ways for SMEs to communicate their progress to their key stakeholders, from big buyers who are looking to reduce their Scope 3 emissions, but also banks that they might contact to get loans. So it's in everyone's interest really to make sure that this information is as accurate as possible.
Yes, I think those are all the questions that we have about this particular tool. There are some more questions about SME Climate Hub's work, Pamela, which I think I can logically bring in after the second half of your presentation.
Sounds perfect. And before I jump back in with the last presentation that we wanted to run by you all, we might have another question for you just to get to know you better. We were curious to understand who is in the audience today. So Cypria, yes, fantastic. Please let us know if you are an SME, service provider, investor, donor. Maybe you sit in a different category, but really curious to see who's with us today.
Right, we have about 50% responses in. If the others could also go ahead and respond, and then we can close out the poll. Thank you. I see a few reactions that you've completed the poll. Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to end poll and share the results.
Great, that's very nice to see. So we do have 30% of entrepreneurs or SME representatives in the room. So definitely hope that this demo was helpful and that the following one will be too, as well as entrepreneur support organizations. I think this constitutes the bulk of the audience today. So obviously, if you're part of an entrepreneur support organization, we would highly encourage you, if you're happy with what we're presenting today, to promote the hub across your networks and with your entrepreneurs, so that they can really get to know the tools that we offer and make the most of them. And we also welcome any feedback, of course, to make sure that we keep improving our offering and building on what the hub is already doing. Now, let's jump into the last section of this workshop, and I'll share my screen again. We wanted to show you a second tool that we're very proud of called Climate Fit. So I'll share my screen. We'll go back to the actual Sme Climate Hub website. So Alex has already showed you this page that is called Start Your Journey to Net Zero. Maybe just to take a bit of a step back in case you first land on our homepage. When you're on this first page, you reach the hub for the first time, you can click on the Get Started button and you're given two options. You can, of course, make the commitment immediately if you're an SME and you already feel comfortable with this and you've heard about the commitment and the UN Race to Zero. But if not, we help you start your journey, and that's when you land on this specific page. So you've seen what the calculator looks like. Let's have a look at the second tool that we highlight in our toolbox, which has many more resources, but we really wanted to highlight Comet Fit as a key resource for SMEs to use at the beginning of their journey, especially if they're not that familiar with climate action. So if you're an SME and you click on Start the Course, this is where you land. You have a bit of a progress bar at the top, and there are 7 modules that you can go through. This is how we build Climate Fit. Each module takes about 20 to 30 minutes to complete, and it's all self-paced. So obviously there is a specific order that we suggest, but if you're interested in going through the model on product design before you look at the rest of your operations, you're more than free to do so. It's all self-paced. The only thing that you need to provide to start using the course is your email address, so that we can keep track of your progress and of the modules that you've already gone through. So let's have a look at the different modules first. And so I often say that this is like Climate Action 101 for a small business. So it's an introductory course, but as you will see, it actually goes relatively in depth as well. We think it's a fantastic resource for smaller businesses, but there are even some bigger businesses that might find this helpful, especially for their employees. So we're trying to look at all the different aspects of climate action, starting with strategy and governance. So the first module is really about a company's business model and how they can integrate climate considerations into this model. We also look at operations, and this is mainly about increasing efficiency across business activities and understanding what this means and what impacts this entails. We also look at 2 other aspects of their operations, specifically supply chains. So, most SMEs won't have had a specific look at their suppliers until they take the course. So we help them understand why suppliers are a big piece of the puzzle and how they can really anticipate risks and work on their resilience by looking at their suppliers and supply chains. We also provide a lot of content on product design and how to design more sustainable products, looking not only at the products themselves, but the development process as a whole. And we also look at how SMEs can finance the net zero transition. This also links back to another tool that I mentioned earlier, which is our financial support guide, of course. So we talk about climate investments and related impacts. And we also talk about communication. So when, as a business, even as a small business, you start taking action, you need to understand how to bring your people on board. And that means employees, but also, the communities that you operate in. And it's in your best interest, of course, to make sure that they know about what you're doing. We know that climate action can be a fantastic employee engagement tool. And last but not least, we also created a model on storytelling, because again, when as a business you start taking action towards net zero, it's important to tell your story, because that's what will help you get recognition and visibility. And at the same time, it's important to tell it in a certain way to make sure that it doesn't come across as greenwashing, or to make sure that your message doesn't get misinterpreted. So these are the 7 modules really, and I wanted to walk you more specifically through one of them so that you can see what the content looks like. So randomly, let's pick the one on operations, and let's start with the introduction. Now, we have worked with this, course. We've worked with a fantastic group of athletes, Olympians, with whom we've created videos. So each module starts with a video created with these athletes that really draw comparisons between what needs to happen in a business and the changes that they need to make to take action, for example, in their operations, and what it means for an athlete to work on his or her performance. So I'm not sure whether we'll have the time to play one of these videos today, but I highly encourage you to have a look at them. They're fun. They obviously help provide a bit more context and also help motivate whoever is taking the course. So each one of these modules, thank you. I'm getting a little bit of background noise, so maybe if you could make sure that you are mute, that would be great. So in each one of these modules, we provide additional context, of course, on the space and climate action more broadly. And we also provide specific definitions. And again, if you could please go on mute. Thank you. Specific definitions related to key concepts. So, when it comes to operations, of course, it's important to understand what energy efficiency is, with the definition of renewable energy, how fleets come into play, the impact of business travel policies as well, but also waste and recycling. So many different aspects. Important to understand, the mapping of all these different concepts. Now, we also have specific infographics and other interactive modules where SMEs can actually contribute directly. So we're also gathering feedback through this course to make sure that we can keep improving it as we progress. And this is one of them. And if we keep scrolling down, you'll see that each module has different sections. So, there's an energy efficiency one here, for example, that once again provides a lot of context, like different places where, the user can interact with the content as well. And importantly, also case studies that really show how other SMEs have been tackling this specific challenge. So we have 2 case studies here, again, with general content, but also videos that users can watch. And I'll keep scrolling down. And so this brings them to often a bit of a recap so that they can really digest all the information before they move on to the second lesson, which in this case is about renewable energy. And it keeps going this way. So as you can see, we've tried to make this as interactive as possible, even playful in some cases, and really making sure that there are like lots of different boxes for users to take to find the information that's right for them, but also to keep their attention up and keep the momentum going. So this is it. I could show you a second module if that's of interest, but please bear in mind that this is a resource that you all can access, whether you are an SME or not an SME. And we know that there are different types of organizations in the audience. as long as you provide us with an email address so that we can keep track of your progress, you can actually go through all these modules yourself to find the right information, or even just to test the tool in case you're interested in promoting it across your own SME community if you are an SME support organization, for example. I'll stop here to see if we have any questions at this stage.
I think one question about this particular climate fit tool that you're walking us through, Pamela, is I know you mentioned that there are intro videos to the different modules, that you've put together, but is there just sort of an introduction in terms of how someone can use and like begin using this tool effectively? Where does one begin? How do they grapple with it, etc.?
So we have it on the homepage, so to speak. So this is the introduction to the course as a whole. And then from there, they can jump into each different module, of course.
Great. I think I hope that answers your question. I also have a few comments that folks have started calculating emissions already using the carbon calculator tool. So just, I think that's great that people have started engaging. I think more questions broadly about SME Climate Hub, but I'm going to pause for a few seconds to see if there are any questions, particularly about the climate fit tool at the moment. Just pause maybe for about 15-20 seconds. Folks, you can send them in through chat, please, if there are any questions. I think there's a question in terms of are there any plans, Pamela, in terms of training trainers to be able to conduct some of these to help contextualize it to the different countries that you want to operate in?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's one of the things that we'll be doing with our so-called country launches. Again, we have a global presence, but we'll be running specific recruitment campaigns for priority geographies like India. And so as part of that, we'll look at how we can work with local organizations to really promote these tools and make sure that local SMEs can sit down and get a bit of a demo, similar to what we did today, to understand how they can make the most of the content that we have on the hub.
Great. I also have a few members in the audience signing up to help support country launches as and when you're thinking of them, Pamela. So, we'll send that information across. I think there was one question that came in about how does all the tools that you work, how does it align with the Sustainable Development Goals? Because, that's something that SMEs are already trying to sort of track their work across. So, is that something that's already married into the tool? If you can maybe shed some light on that.
Sure. So the Sustainable Development Goals are a broader network, obviously, at looking at all the different aspects of sustainability. The SME Climate Hub, as the name indicates, looks specifically at climate action. So it's a subset, so to speak, of the SDGs. We're currently building connections with many other platforms out there that are already working with SMEs, from B Corps to UNGC. So we'll be working on really creating a joint narrative that helps SMEs understand the ecosystem as a whole and where the hub sits. And our positioning is really to help SMEs with their climate action plans to make sure that, again, they meet the expectations of their stakeholders, buyers, customers, investors. They can make the most of reducing their own emissions, and they're really fit for the future. They can build resilience into their business.
Great. I think there are some questions in terms of partnerships, because there are a few entrepreneur support organizations in the audience, as you would have seen. Yes. So I know you had the slide where you talked about the different kinds of partners that you're working with. So if you could maybe shed some light, Pamela, on what it takes for large organizations that work with SMEs to partners or be a partner/advisor, any information on that front.
Very happy to provide that. So the slide that I pulled up earlier showed what our global ecosystem of partners is currently looking like. So these are organizations that work on a global level. But again, we're now adapting this to specific regions and working, for example, in India with local partners. So even if we're not currently operating in, or we are operating in your country, but not proactively running recruitment campaigns in your country, I think that's a better way to put it, we'd be very happy to start with to add you to our list of outreach partners. So throughout the year, we run communication campaigns. We're very active on social media, online. We create assets for all our partners to use so that they can help us promote the hub across their networks. So we'd be very happy to work with you on that already. So see if you're able to leverage some of these assets to support your networks through the hub. So if that's of interest, you can contact me. We can add you to the list of partners that we regularly go out to with these assets for the campaigns that we're running. So, going forward, there's definitely going to be one around COP27 in November, for example, but there will also be regional moments that we will try and leverage. So if you want to work with us, we can add you to that list. And then, when we will start working maybe more proactively and running specific campaigns in your country region, we can also discuss how we could do that together.
Great. I've received a couple of questions in the broader incentive umbrella, so I'm going to try and compile that into one question. Just a curiosity around what kind of incentives are offered for SMEs to commit to net zero, and in the Climate Hub's experience, what has been the most effective in getting SMEs to come into that journey?
Yeah, so the incentives piece is definitely one that we want to do more on. So the incentives that we currently offer are mainly communication and marketing incentives that are also linked to the UN Race to Zero. So SMEs who are part of our community get a lot of visibility. They're part of our campaign. We regularly pitch them also as spokespeople for specific events. I think I might have mentioned already that we're creating a badge for them to use online that will get them recognition on specific platforms that consumers will be able to see. So this is all that is already visible, so to speak. But in the background, we're actually doing more work to see if and how we could also set up financial and commercial incentives for SMEs. So this is all happening in the background because it's quite a complex piece, but we're working with multinationals and also financial actors to see if we can find better recipes for SME incentives, and also understand how we can implement this on the hub itself or through partners. So this is a work in progress, but hopefully, it will all become visible in the coming months and years.
Sorry, I tried going off mute there. Thanks. I hope that answers the question that a few of you had. I think the next question was just understanding, because you mentioned 106 countries, you already have SMEs signed up. Has it been purely voluntary across all these geographies? Are there any actors you're working with where you're tying in maybe legal requirements or legal mandates to kind of boost registrations onto the hub as well?
Good question. So it's absolutely completely voluntary. The hub is meant to support SMEs first and foremost. However, we do know that there are some stakeholders who are increasingly looking, say, for example, multinationals that are looking at their scope 3 emissions. And so trying to understand whether there are any frameworks out there that they can use in order to identify the best suppliers to work with, including SMEs. So at some point, we might see multinationals interested in using, the SME Climate Hub as their framework to work with SME suppliers, sustainable SME suppliers. So we're not presenting this as a requirement, it's voluntary, but we know that it's in SME's interest to really start taking action so that they can get the recognition that comes with it, but also, as I said before, meet the expectations of these other organizations.
Great. I think I have one more question that we have not addressed. I think this is so basically trying to understand before promoting this in the portfolios that some of these organizations or representatives are working with, what does it mean on an annual basis if an SME were to, commit to the net zero targets or just sign up to be part of this this journey? If you could maybe help shed some light on that.
What does he mean on an annual basis? So we're providing the tools that you've seen, so the calculator, the Comet Fit education course, soon the action models as well, that will help SMEs understand where to focus their efforts when they start taking action, so the low-hanging fruits and also the actions that will have the biggest impact on their business. So we definitely expect SMEs to use these tools and make the most of them. And after that, we'll be monitoring how SMEs are doing through the reporting tool. So starting from 18 months after they make the commitment, we'll ask them to provide reports. Similar to what you've seen with the calculator, the reporting tool is going to be very simple. It's a simplified framework specifically designed for smaller businesses. Some sections are mandatory, some others are optional because they ask for information that banks, for example, might be interested in getting if they decide to offer a loan to an SME. So it's all very modular. We're trying to make sure that it fits, it meets SMEs' needs, and that's what will be expected on an annual basis. I should also add that we will be trying to create communities of practice around specific action models so that SMEs can learn from each other. So we know that peer-to-peer learning is extremely valued among small businesses, and so we'll try and do that around specific actions. So say energy efficiency or renewables. We'll try and make sure that businesses can learn from each other within a specific region or also at a global level to accelerate really the pace of changes in their own business.
Great, thanks. I think this is probably the last question that I have at my end, and do send in questions if there are any before we move into wrapping up. So this question, Pamela, is I think you addressed some of it where you're talking about creating communities of practice. Currently, what are the opportunities for peer-to-peer learning, networking for other SMEs on the hub look like? Is there any sort of exchange of resources that's taking place there?
Yeah, so the communities of practice I mentioned are probably the best answer to this question. I will say that we also have a page on the hub that lists all the committed businesses, and you can use different filters to see which other businesses are committed in your sector, your country. So it's a searchable list. So of course, SMEs are more than free to reach out to their, peers in their country, for example, if they want to. We're also doing some peer-to-peer knowledge exchange through our communication campaigns because we design these campaigns as business activation ones. So we create assets that SMEs themselves can use to not only promote the hub on their own channels, but also talk about their own commitments and progress. So if you follow us, for example, on social, you will see a lot of this information around, key summits or moments in time. So there's a bit of peer-to-peer knowledge exchange there, but, the next step is definitely for us to create these communities of practice to facilitate this even more.
Great. And I think one question, this is directed to Alex, broadly about normative. I know, Pamela, you spoke about the SME, the definition of the SMEs that you work with who would qualify to be on the Climate Hub. But just if you could shed some light on the work that normative does, Alex, in terms of the kinds of organizations that you work with, because there have been a few requests for people to sort of get connected and reach out.
Yeah, no, happy to. So normative, again, besides supporting the Sme Climate Hub from a Q1 software perspective, and especially the SMEs through the tool, we support pretty much broadly all industries. So our approach is industry agnostic. It works across different sectors, countries, and company sizes. Though we do focus on larger enterprises that have these huge and massive value chains, because that's usually the big challenge, and also how these two come together, the enterprises and the Sme Climate Hub. These enterprises, they have all of these suppliers and ultimately also customers that many times are actually small, medium enterprises. So we kind of connecting both then through the work with the Sme Climate Hub, but our main customer segment is usually larger enterprises or larger companies in general, but globally distributed and throughout industries. So very widely applicable, I would say, if that helps.
Yes, definitely. I think. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I don't see any more questions at the moment. So I'm just going to pause for a few seconds. If there are any questions, if this is your last chance, folks, last questions, you can get them into chat. We'll have Pamela and Alex take a look at them. All right. I think that is pretty much it in terms of the questions, but thank you so much once again, Pamela and Alex, for taking the time to speak to us today. It truly was a wonderful demo. I think this is the first time even I've engaged in depth with the tool. And I think there's just a lot to take away, especially for an SMEs. It's a ready reckoner to get them started on that net zero target journey. So thank you once again. And we've had a few requests for people reaching out for connections, for partnerships. Just a note for everyone on the call. If you would like to be connected, please reach out to the Andy team and we will help facilitate the introductions as relevant to Alex and Pamela. And at the same time, I would request everyone to stay on the same link as we move into the next part of our agenda, which is the launch of the new report from Andy that looks specifically at what Pamela and Alex have been talking about, climate metrics for small and growing businesses. So it's a publication that we've put together where we are highlighting the different types of measurement frameworks out there and providing some guidance about, if you're an SME, what you should be looking at, what are the different resources that are available, in addition to the wonderful ones that Pamela and Alex have already shared, specifically that looks at emissions and net zero. So thank you once again. We will be starting in 4 minutes according to my clock. So if you could stay on the same link, we will begin. Thank you, Pamela. Thank you, Alex, for your time today.
Thank you all. Have a nice rest of the day.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Very wonderful sessions. It was truly valuable insights and awesome information. It's very impactful. It's not only for an individual, only for the organizations, but it is for the climate, it's for the society. Thank you. Thank you, Pamela.
I'm glad I stayed a few more seconds to hear this. Thank you for this feedback very
You
much.
stay. You better stay because there are 2 minutes, and we can utilize this. The last few moments in a very effective way. That can, history is full of moments which brought the big bang changes in the world. A small decisions can make or break the lives of the millions. And climate change is actually the questions for me, for you, for everyone who is on the planet Earth. It's not only the planet Earth, but it's a part of the galaxy. So it is not your responsibility, it is everyone's responsibility. So you have touched a very, very, effective and very useful topic. So everyone has to contribute for the greater gain of the society, for the humanity, for the mother nature. I would love to be the part of any volunteerism. Life is more than goals.
Sorry, Naval, I'm jumping in because we are short on time, but thank you for those kind words. And Pamela, yes, I'm glad that you had an opportunity to hear that as well. We are at times, and we also have Mallory on the call. So thank you again for hanging in there. I am going to hand it over to Mal, who heads the impact work that we do at Andy, to talk us through this new exciting report that we've put together.
Thank you so much, Cypria. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. Like Cypria said, my name is Mallory St. Clair, and I am Andy's Senior Impact Analyst. I'm out of our Washington, D.C. office, and I handle all of our internal and external IMM. And I'm really pleased to come to you today with my associate, Dewey Joshi, out of Climate Collective Foundation. Today, we are really excited to announce the launch of one of Andy's newest reports called the Climate, that we have affectionately started to call the Climate Metrics Report. And this report is essentially a synthesis and comparison of all of the climate metrics, impact measurement, and management resources aimed towards climate SGBs that we've been able to find. So we're going to celebrate this launch with you and hopefully also give you a little preview of what you can expect with this report. Thank you, Cypria. So I just introduced myself. Julie, could you introduce yourself really quickly?
Yes, for sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Zui Joshi. Thanks, Mallory, and thanks, Saipria. I'm a partner at Climate Collective, and we've been working closely with Andy to publish this report. I lead the impact portfolio as well as the acceleration work at Climate Collective. Very pleased to be here and really excited about this launch. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. So Priya, can we have the next slide, please? So to give you an overview of what's kind of gone into preparing this guide, basically we started to put this together and conceptualize this when we realized that there wasn't a lot of guidance around climate impact measurements for small and growing businesses in the economies that typically most of our members target. So these kind of emerging economies. And there wasn't really anything that brought together a lot of the guidance in terms of frameworks and tools in a comparative way. So we put this guide together with support of the Tipping Point Fund for impact investment based on these types of needs. And in order to develop this, we first started with a series of different types of climate metrics roundtables with entrepreneur support organizations, impact investors, accelerators and incubators, basically everybody who's an Andy member and works in this space to try and get a sense of what the needs were. And then Julie and her team conducted a really comprehensive desk review. They interviewed ESOs and impact investors, convening organizations, and SGBs as well. And they also surveyed climate SGBs under Climate Collective Foundation's portfolio. So we've kind of done both primary and secondary research to put this guide together. And we believe that we kind of cover a lot of really key points in terms of people who are going to need this guide. Next page. The way that we've organized this guide is we have a lot of focus on the practicality. So part one, we kind of put together just perspectives and approaches and data that we gleaned from actually having one-on-one conversations with impact investors and ESOs. We talk about a lot of kind of the common challenges that face different actors, especially SGBs, when it comes to measuring climate impact. And as part of that, we have put together some really interesting case studies from actors such as New Energy Nexus on how they tackle different aspects of climate metrics. And then on the second part of this guide, we have these comparative lists of climate impact tools and frameworks. I don't want to give kind of the whole thing away because obviously we want you to read the guide, but we have kind of curated these specific lists with the notion that, okay, we're especially looking to support climate SGBs in emerging economies. And then we also do deep dives into 3 of the most popular tools that we found are most used by SGBs or impact investors or accelerators and incubators. Next slide, please. In terms of the case studies that I had mentioned, Julie and her team put together these case studies from New Energy Nexus, their derivative, GIZ, Fundavali, and Omnivore. So we have entrepreneur support organizations and impact investors from a wide range of geographies. And I think that you guys will find these insights that they put together really, really helpful. Next slide, please. And this is kind of where you can see a preview of the comparative tables and the deep dives that we have done into 3 key impact tools. So we decided to do deep dives into the IRIS Plus tool, the Crane tool, and the climate impact forecasting tool, because based on the research, these are kind of the most frequently used tools and frameworks for folks to measure climate impacts. So in terms of, if you were ever somebody who has been kind of intimidated by tools or kind of really confused about how certain frameworks work, this guide really breaks it down and walks you through how to utilize and understand these types of tools and frameworks. Next slide, please. I think I've talked for long enough. I'd love to give it over to Julie now.
Great, thanks, Mallory. So as Mallory explained, we've really put effort to make this guide as simple, easily accessible as possible. Some of the key highlights, and there are many more in the guide, but one of the key things that came out with all of the interactions with small and growing businesses in climate is that they find the impact language extremely hard to understand. And so we've put a good glossary of frequently used terms in impact, which I think would be very useful for anybody, as Mallory mentioned, intimidated by the general language of climate impact. There is a general understanding of importance of impact assessment among the small and growing businesses. They understand that they need impact measurement and quantification to attract capital, for example, and to talk to other key stakeholders in the ecosystem. But one of the interesting insights was that even though there are tools and frameworks available in the ecosystem, they're generally not being used a lot by the SGBs, and they're still looking for an easy to use, cost-effective solution in the market. There is a dissonance between impact investors and climate SGBs about the expectations from impact investors. Most of the impact investors that we found out, so we went and did a lot of interactions with impact investors who invest in climate startups. And what we found is that they expect only a few key impact indicators from businesses and not an entire deep dive or a life cycle assessment. And also a lot of them have developed customized impact frameworks. And we have talked about this in our case studies as well. Next slide. Some of the key things that we also found out that there are still gaps in the ecosystem, and we do feel that there is a lot more work that needs to be done in this space. So the way forward from this guide, definitely one is the adaptation and resilience focus. So we see that that most of the resources in the ecosystem focus on climate mitigation and not so much on ANR. But there is a lot more interest and funding geared towards adaptation and resilience. So we need to do, there needs to be work to expand knowledge and build a robust taxonomy as well. In terms of funding, there needs to be some more funding flowing into impact. So for example, enterprise support organizations who work very closely with small and growing businesses need additional funding to spend on capacity building for the SGBs who require it. Also, impact investors need to allocate capital for impact monitoring and measurement. There certainly needs to be more dialogue on climate impact, specifically for small and growing businesses. So we do need more exchange of best practices, new frameworks, and case studies. To facilitate that and ensure that this is not a static effort from our side, we have developed an impact page. The URL is on the next page. Anyone here who wants to continue this dialogue and help us with more resources, if you have anything that you have published or you're working on and you want this to be published on our page for more information around this impact monitoring and measurement around climate, please feel free to write to us. With that, I'll hand it back to Mallory, and I'm really, really excited to keep the dialogue going and be a part of this climate metrics guide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. Please look in the chat for the links that we had mentioned. And then additionally, we'll put in the chat my email and Julie's email. So if you guys would like to liaise with any of us directly, please do so. But for now, since we have just a few minutes before the next session, are there any questions that you have for us initially about this guide? And you can also feel free to put it in the chat, and Cypria can forward them on to us.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it would be great if you could put them in the chat, but given the interest of time, we might not be able to address all, but we'll definitely get them answered from Joey, Mallory, and get those responses across to you.
I think I see somebody whose hand is raised. Can they unmute themselves, Cypria?
Hello,
Hey,
you can hear
please.
me? Yeah,
Yes, I can.
my name is Dr. Samia. I'm working as a run one startup to develop different equipment and awareness seminar to the how to control the climate change in working. We need some collaborator organization to running the awareness session and different local strategies to the engage the community, how can join hand to work the climate issue. So how can apply and collaborate your organization to conduct different seminars and meetings, and how can plan to certain local based devices engage to the local university students to from environmental assessment tools for local level. So how can join any MOUs sign with you, any collaboration guideline available in your website to jointly work together to development of climate change and action and control the pollution in our region.
Yeah, I can probably, I think you might probably want to collaborate directly with Cypria or Suchi from our India chapter. Did you have a question about the climate metrics guide itself?
Yeah, if Mallory, let me jump in there. Dr. Samia, if this question is really around how can we collaborate beyond the specifics of the climate metrics guide, then please do reach out to us, and we're happy to sort of take that discussion offline. But here, I think the request is for any questions specific to the metrics guide and to information that was presented. But I'd say in the interest of time, we will, and sorry for cutting that short, you have all of our, Zoe, please go ahead and share the link if you can at your end, Climate Collective link, because I'm not actually able to copy it. So feel free to do that at your end. And while you're doing that, I'll just say thank you and remind everybody to join us for the other session that's starting in 5 minutes. Dewey, if you can do that, jaldi say, go ahead. Otherwise, we'll share it with participants afterwards.
I'm not able to send to everyone. I can only send to you or Cypria.
Okay. So apologies for that technical glitch. I'm not able to share at my end either for some reason. So we will make sure that we share the Climate Collective link subsequently with participants. Yeah. Thank you so much, both of you, and see you on the next session. Bye for now.
Thank you, Charita. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.